Corridor. Morning, everybody. Nice to see everybody on this White Thunder morning. White Thunder is a white tea. Last week we did Enemy's Demise, which is a cake tea. This week we're going to do White Thunder, which is a loose leaf aged white tea. Now, before we jump into the session, let's discuss the possibility of an understudy error, because getting these errors out of the way right away is always a great thing. So some of you, when you take your baggie out, will have something marked for this date, but it won't say White Thunder. Most of you, it will say White Thunder. For a few of you, it will say Fond Memories. Don't worry about what it says. Just go ahead and use those leaves because they are White Thunder leaves. All right. Last week a cake, this week loose leaf. Where are we this week? We're in Fujian Province, which is the home of white tea. So last week, again, we talked a little bit about the history of white tea. We talked about white tea as having created some misunderstandings in terms of literature, because white tea, as we refer to it today, and as people in the tea industry in China and everywhere refer to it today, refers to a methodology. And that methodology is to have slight oxidation. Remember, green tea is unoxidized. Oxidation is a chemical process, right? Driven by enzymes. White tea is slightly oxidized. And so by slightly oxidized, anywhere from 3, 6, 7% oxidation. So not a lot, but it makes a huge difference in terms of flavor profile. It makes a difference in terms of storage, because white tea is infinitely easier to store than green tea. So by the end of this session, we'll have talked a little bit more about storage. We'll have talked about what white tea, especially aged white tea, is allegedly good for in terms of health benefits. And we'll have had a chance to taste a wonderful aged white tea, White Thunder. You'll also know much more about white tea from Zhenghe. So Zhenghe is the name of the county from which this tea comes from. And again, it's in Fujian Province. It's in the northern part of Fujian, but it's not as far north as the Wuyi Mountains. Yes.
Somebody wants to confirm the bag says fond memory and has a February 10 date.
That's correct. That is the bag you should use. And not all of you will have this situation. See, when I make mistakes, I make them in a complicated way. So some of you got this type of bag, and some of you got exactly the right bag. Most of you got exactly the right bag. All right. So thinking about Zhenghe, what is this area look like? What's the terroir of this area? It is mountainous. There are forests in the mountain. The soil is both brownish and reddish. And generally speaking, the weather, it averages somewhere around 55, 56 degrees. That's a yearly average. During the springtime, it's closer between 60 and 68. You get in the summer, you get 85 to 95. And in the winter, it'll get a little bit cooler. Let's say something like about 50, 48 to 50, something like that. It's disastrous if it gets cold, really cold for a long time. So let's define really cold. So if it gets down to say 23 for a night or two, that's going to be okay. But if it gets down anywhere beneath that, and there's any length of time that that occurs, the tea plant will be harmed. Conversely, in the summer, if it gets up there to about 108, 109, 110, that's disastrous also. So you've got this range for which this tea ideally grows. And it does make a difference. The other aspect of this is where it's growing. So we've talked about this golden latitude between around 19 degrees and 38 degrees, as you can grow tea in that in those latitudes. This is around 27, so it's right about in the center of that. So it's a really, really good area to grow tea, and it grows very well. This tea that you're going to have today, White Thunder, doesn't look like your typical tea bush. Instead, it looks like a small tree. And as such, one of the things you're going to notice is that the leaves are larger. You're also going to notice, as you think about it, that those larger leaves reflect the fact that you're getting a pick that's a little bit deeper into the spring. What do I mean by deeper into the spring? Well, the earliest spring picks can come around March 18th, March 19th, March 20th. Now, of course, weather makes all the difference in the world. So how the weather opens up depends whether you get an earlier pick for first pick or a little bit later for first pick. But on average, 18th, 19th, or 20th. Occasionally, it warms up quicker, and so some of the early picks can be truly at the beginning of March, 5th, 6th, or 7th. Occasionally, you have cold snaps that last, and so really the first picks don't start till the end of March. No matter what, I'm talking about the first picks of the bushes. These small trees, this is something a little bit different. These picks come, first off, they are not as dense in their appearance as these small bushes, a little bit scraggly, and they're tall. They get up to about 6, 7, 8 feet. And so the picking methodology is a little different because you have to reach your arms up or you're on a ladder, whereas with the bushes, you're right down there. The pickers are right down there at a level where it's really easy to pick. So the picking of this particular type of tea is a little bit specialized because you got to be a good picker on a ladder. So all things that are a little bit different, but not so different that it's hard to understand what's going on with this tea. This tea, just like the other white tea we talked about last week, Enemy's Demise, just like all white teas, is picked, especially after you get past that very first pick, it's picked down to the 4th or 5th leaf. And when you pick that way, everything is brought into the plant, that is the processing facility, and then at that time sorted by whichever grade you want this tea to be. Now, one of the things, we sent you 3 pictures yesterday, and one of those pictures shows bamboo slat. So that's a good thing to keep in your mind, or a good picture to keep in your mind, because all the tea is handled on that. And then you see that it fits in to a group of bamboo trays that can be rolled around. And if you look in the background of that, you'll see that there's a place where it looks like there's 2 or 3 stories where you can roll these things into. Well, that's actually a 4-story facility. It's built out over a canyon, and every night they take the tea in there on those slats via that mechanism that you can push multiple slats into, and it's put in certain locations by date, also locations by how it's been sorted so far. So this gives you a little bit of context for what's going on with this tea, because first off, this is an all day, most of the night activity. So these guys during harvest time are working all the way up to 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning, and they're up early. They're up at 5 or 6 in the morning. And so the 5 or 6 in the morning attitude is, okay, let's check the weather. Let's see whether it's going to be clear. Let's see whether we're going to have fog, any drizzle. When is the sun expected? I mean, they need a detailed weather report, because if the weather report says, okay, we're going to have a fully sunny day today, no fog, no overcast, then right away they get up the other workers and start to prepare all of these slats of tea leaves, because they're going to put them out in sun dry. Remember, all of this tea is sun dried. It is not machine processed, or it's not baked. The only exception would be is if it rained continuously for 2 weeks or was dewy consecutively for 2 or 3 weeks, then they would start to think about baking. So as a backup, they have baking, but normally they sun dry. And that's part of what makes white tea what it is. And that's also part of what makes this area's white tea. Zhenghe, Jianyang, Fuding all have sun drying facilities, and it takes enormous space and it takes a big staff. If the weather report, when it's first checked, says, we're going to have fog, for instance, and it's going to be kind of a thick fog, and it'll burn off by 11 or 12 o'clock. Then you allow everybody to sleep an extra hour or two, you get everybody up, and then you start the process, because you can't sun dry in the fog. And that's really important to understand, because what you're trying to do, let's talk about this a minute. Why do you sun dry? You sun dry to reduce the moisture in the tea leaf. You've got to get that moisture down before it gets to market to somewhere between 5 and 8%. And by sun drying, especially over a 2-week period, you can get it very close to that percentage. So let's talk about the sun drying process a little bit more. Does this mean that in this gigantic courtyard where they wheel out all this tea, that they put the slats each individually on the ground so that they can get sun dried? Answer is no. They retain them on these contraptions where you can stack the slats and move them via wheels, and every hour they rotate. So the one, and they're about 8 deep, 8 or 9 or maybe 10 deep. Well, depending on how you count. If you count number 1 as the one that's exposed to the sun, and then number 2 is the next one down. Number 1 becomes number 10, number 2 moves up to 1, and so forth. So every hour they go through this process. So it's not only the heat of the sun, but it's the sunlight itself. And it's not 8 hours at a time that these leaves are getting sunlight. So these are all things that many times people, if they're going through a simple explanation, they don't understand. They can't get the full vision. This gives you a little bit more of the full vision. Now, I said they work until 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. in the morning. Well, wait a minute. Sun dry, doesn't the sun go down there at 5 or 6 like it does here? I mean, is it that far south? And the answer is the sun there and the sun here are roughly the same in terms of timing. What I'm referring to is that new tea every day comes in. And you start to sort that in the afternoon, but it takes a very long time to sort. And you've got to sort with the silver needle in particular. Every single bud is handled and lined up on a slat. That's incredibly labor intensive. Now, let's be fair. If you and I were given this assignment, you and I would take a week to do what they do in half a day. So they're skilled in addition to the fact that they've been doing this for a long time. And so they're able to accomplish much, much more than the way I'm describing it. The way I'm describing it, we all know that if we were laying out one bud at a time, gosh, that's going to take a long time. I'm never going to get through this project. So in addition to that, once they get the, and so every day they have to do housekeeping within the building where the stuff is housed, where the tea is housed overnight. They have to label everything and make sure that they're putting up the labels for the newly inventoried tea. For the tea that's been there for 6 or 7 days, you got to move it to the next day. You have to move it to the place for the next day. It is an enormously complex project. And again, although it sounds different, it sounds easy. Oh, you pick, you sun dry, then you sun dry some more. Oh, and then you sun dry a little bit more, and then you sort once more, and then you sell. Gosh, that sounds easy. It's really easy until you start doing it. And then you see, oh no, this is really complicated. And I have to think about a lot of different things. And that's why around the world, many people have tried to grow white tea. Growing the white tea is the easiest part of all those tasks. And that's not an easy thing to do, but it's the easiest of all those tasks. Once you've gotten through that, you have to make some decisions. Well, am I going to do it the traditional way? If I do it the traditional way, I need a lot of space. Oh my gosh, I need a lot of workers. You know, I'm over here in Africa. Maybe why don't I just take a shortcut? I'll just do the oven process and nobody will know the difference. The answer to that is on so many different levels, the consumers right away know the difference. And on so many different levels, the scientists right away know the difference. Why? The chemical content of the tea leaves themselves is different. 2, the taste is different. If you do it via mechanization versus this very old-fashioned hand way to do it, sun-drying way to do it. So all of these things matter. All of these steps matter. And this is why over the years, this has been developed very carefully into this process. Now, over the years, let's get it clear what I mean when I say over the years, because when you're talking about China, over the years, is he over the 5,000 years, over the 1,000 years? No, I'm over at most the 300 years. White tea is the newest of, as far as we understand, is the newest of all the methodologies to process tea. And it really came into its own by the end of the 18th century. So somewhere around the late 1700s, it started to come in its own. But then as a retail and outward looking tea that you sell outside of Zhenghe or sell outside of the area of Fujian Province, that really didn't start in earnest until the 1800s. around the 1850s, 1860s, 1870s. So that gives you, this is a baby in terms of the teas and the development of teas. And yet it has played an outsized role in all of our lives. And wait a minute, in all of our lives? Well, let's see how it might have. At least 50% of us, it's played an outsized role, because for people who use cosmetics, many of the cosmetics these days have white tea extract. Why is that? Because in the 2000s, early 2000s, what happened as scientists looked at white tea? They discovered, oh my gosh, there are elements in this that are great for the skin. Hey, let's see if this might work in cosmetics. And the French have it in their cosmetics. Japanese have it in their cosmetics. Chinese have it in theirs. Oh yeah. This has an effect, a good effect for skin health. So white tea, for that reason, has played an outsized role in many of our lives. There's another reason. Many people understand white tea as being calming, having L-theanine, anti-inflammatory. There's all these elements that white tea is recognized for. And as such, it's moved from just being white tea to, oh, this is something that's good for me. And wow, it makes me feel good. And it helps me have clarity. So there's lots of reasons that people from all over the world have turned to white tea and said, oh, this is kind of interesting. This is an elixir of some sort. We'll talk more if we have time to talk about some of the alleged health benefits. And I don't want to get into that yet. Instead, let me have the tea master come and demonstrate to you how to brew this tea. And then after you've watched the tea master do this, she will brew with you, and then we'll open it up for your comments and your comments about quality of tea, about aroma of tea, the look of the tea, and the taste of the tea. So without further ado, it is my wonderful pleasure to bring forth the beautiful and numinous tea master, Bijou.
That was much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Only today. Okay, I learned more English. So okay, so I speak a little bit Mandarin. So today, why? Still, the John helped me recording. So I sent to my friend in China. So yeah, she went to bring the large cup at home. Okay, so 我做白茶 so I do white tea. Okay, so 这是2个玻璃杯，一白。
So this is her tableau, and it starts out with 2 glass cups.
Yeah, 2个杯子。那 today 呢 we I need to make it easy, the simple. So usually we use 2 glass. 我们用2个杯子来做的，这是茶漏 ，this is the strainers. This is my tea pad 茶虫 ，it still have it's a little cute Okay, so I can listen. Okay, we do it.
All right, when you set up your tableau, what is absolutely essential is to have 2 cups and the strainer. All the rest of this stuff, the tea pets, that's optional. The tray this way is optional. The tray is very useful because you're going to find water floats all over the place. And it's nice to have a tray that actually drains somewhere where you can safely have the water drain to.
this 的 specialty tray 呢，so 这是很容易的茶盘。specialty tray 呢 ，I have this one. You can this is easy. This is the the strainer. So first time
Drainer.
a strainer. So
No, no, drainer. The
strainer.
drainage.
Yeah, strainers. First time 第一次。This is not green. Okay, I the open my tea set. So
So the most important thing to remember is that she's demonstrating kind of a rhythm, being present. So she's using 200-degree water. You can use any temperature water between 175 and 200 to make sure that the glasses are heated, to make sure that there's no soap stains or anything left on the glasses. But when you actually brew, you're going to use 175-degree water. So again, tea is sensitive to aromas, it's sensitive to other tastes, and that's why we're so careful and so aware of making sure everything is just really, really clean.
yeah, can I talk to my friend? So 水也是特殊的水 ，the water is special. So we slowly so yeah, usually so when I brew the tea at home, I sit down, but I'm working and standing. So smelling, inhale, exhale. Okay, so I do this first steps. Okay, I use it. This water, I use water. Okay.
So when she says the water is special, what she means is it's filtered. So we use filtered water.这个是175, 对不对?
175.
Yeah. So she drew 175-degree water and she's aerating the water, dissipating the steam. When you brew tea, and you notice we have nothing to cover the tea because this is brewed uncovered. If you want the best flavor, and by best being defined as brightest flavor, for this type of tea, you're going to leave it uncovered.
So 175 now. So why? So usually 175 from the international tea factory now. So it's glass need hot or 175 watt. But the tea now doesn't like 170. Tea like the 170. We little bit judgment. So one more time, the.
So if you
Probably,
err on
yeah.
temperature, err on the side of cooler.
Yeah, this I prefer, the so easy, but my fantasy, the understand. So, yeah, two. So today now I do first. I take.
So this is already pre-measured, 4 grams. You put it in the heated cup.
The second 呢，就是一定要唤醒它的茶，要 cover 横，就是说叫这样的。
So you're going to shake the leaves up, and you notice that she's shaking it sideways, not up and down.
This technique, this very different. You can listen.
Trying to heat up or wake up the leaves. And then you notice that she's going to put it in the dissipated water back into dissipated steamed water back into the pot, and use the fact that it's easier to control the pour out of a pot like this and pour away from the leaves.
Yeah, leaves you see here, right? Turn. Yeah.
So you try not to pour directly on the leaves. You're trying to avoid scalding them. And, if you miss, bad aim or any of that, don't worry about it. This is not, there are significant rules. However, if there's a miss on one of them, don't worry about it. because at the end of the day, it's still gonna taste good. We're aiming for perfection of some sort, but it's hard to achieve each and every time. We give you the details of what to aim for. Don't stress out over it. The details also keep you present and involved. And present and involved is how you should be when you're making tea, when you're appreciating tea, and when you're commenting on tea. All right, so she put the water in, the timer was set for 4 minutes. And so now I will talk to you a little bit while this is brewing. So in addition, why is it that this particular place focuses on a spring pick? It focuses on a spring pick because the chemical constituents, because of the heat in the environment, as it gets warmer, the way that tea matures is different than when it's cooler. When it's cooler, you have more of the amino acids. The amino acids help present a mellower flavor with the tea. As you get into the hotter months, you actually have more elements within the tea that bring out bitterness. So that's another reason that we focus on the spring teas. That's not the most important reason, though. The most important reason is when you go to this place in the spring, we go out there, I can actually wear a shirt without a sleeveless shirt. And it's pleasant, the temperature is pleasant. In other words, my point being, I'm not afraid of mosquitoes and the other bugs in the environment because there almost aren't any. But then as you move into April, and heaven forbid if you go out there in May, every single day, humid, hot, mosquito driven, bug driven. So as you get later in the season, it's just harder to have tea that's going to come back to the processing plant in good shape. And so farmers in some areas, that's why they use pesticides, because you get further in the season, they'll be left with nothing of their crop if they don't use the pesticides. So when we're looking at particular farms, we're actually trying to ascertain some things. Are you only picking during the spring? If you're only picking during the spring, you don't need to be spraying. Are you picking and selling a summer or a fall crop? If you're doing that, at some point, you have to be spraying. You have to be doing something in order to mitigate the pests. Yes.
Is this aged? And if so, how long?
This is aged, but not in the way we, oh, I see. This was a different question. Great question. And yes, it is aged. And it's aged, this one's 12, no, this one's 12 years old. Oh, no, you're right. It is 14 years old. Yeah, 14 years old. And this is loose leaf aged. So some of the aging occurred at the factory in China. Some of it occurred here. Most of it occurred here. All right, 4 minutes is concluded. You notice the tea master not in a huge rush, very measured. Better to get it right than to rush through it. Separating the leaves from the tea liquid, not in a hurry. We're going to save these leaves because you get a lot of good pores from each one of these steeps. All right, so take a look at this color. This color is just beautiful. So you can tell that there was actually something in here. This was done at 175 or less. And so first thing I'm going to do is look at these leaves. I'm going to smell the leaves. Okay. Next thing we're gonna do, and you're not doing it yet, I'm gonna demonstrate entering the quality arena, which is I first take a 175-degree sip, which means I can intake a little bit more than say if it were a cliff tea or a fully fermented tea. I cover my tongue. I try and ascertain the areas of dryness. So those would be the astringency areas in the tongue or in the mouth. Are they the same for every single one of us? The answer to that is no. Each of us is individual because we're genomically different. So where it occurs in our mouth is going to be different, but it will occur because these are signals to the tongue. Hey, this thing has flavonoids / polyphenols in it. I'm then make a judgment about after I swallow the aftertaste. Do I detect it first off? Where and really what is it? And then lastly, and this sometimes takes a bit, what are the energetics? So energetics is a broad term to address how do I feel after I drink? My extremities cooler? Are they warmer? Am I feeling any other? Is there any other feeling I want to bring out? And so these are all fair things to bring out. So I'm going to take this initial sip. Not in a hurry, just letting it roll over my tongue. I'm going to take notes because next week, all of you are going to experience another white tea, and it's going to be very different from this. And if you have good notes, you'll be able to refer back. Okay, I'm sensing an aftertaste. I'm going to take a second sip of this. And as I do this second sip, I'm going to appreciate the aroma and the taste and verify what I think I felt in terms of astringency on the first sip. Okay, it's your turn to brew. Yes.
The dry leaves seem to me to have an apricot aroma.
Oh, love that. So one commentator indicates that the dry leaves have a fruity, and the fruit here mentioned was apricot. That's a fair and a good observation. All right, as you're setting up, remember to set your timer for 4 minutes. Remember to make sure you heat up the cups. And by the way, you just heard that commentator talk about an apricot, a sense of apricot aroma in the leaves. We all define aromas a little bit differently. So if to you, when you do it, oh no, that's not apricot, that's peach, or that is a plum. All of those are valid. Don't feel badly if, no, I don't get apricot, I get grape. These, what you're telling me is that there's a class of aromas there, which is absolutely well identified, that indicate a fruitiness. So making sure that both cups are thoroughly heated, dissipating the steam. Remember, if you air in terms of temperature, air lower. So don't be 180. If you're going to be a different temperature than 175, be 170, be 165. All of those are valid and good temperatures to be at because you'll get the brightness of this tea. Put the
Don't forget
leaves
the-
in.
yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Shaking it's not this style. Here, see me.
So horizontal shake,
We have tea brand. She's speaking incredible.
yes, we absolutely have tea friends who have incredible shaking technique.
Shaking tea.
Trying not to pour directly on the leaves. And making sure you heat up the recipient cup. Timer is 4 minutes. Okay. So what are these so-called alleged health benefits? So for white tea in general, they do have lots of catechins. Everybody is aware of catechins from green tea because in test tubes, they're anti-tumor, a lot of good things. Heart health, there's some good health literature around heart health and green tea. And that's because of the catechins, e.g. CG being apparently the most active of those catechins. White tea has a lot of catechins as well. In addition to the catechins, it has considerable L-theanine. What is the value of L-theanine? Well, on the surface value is it brings you physical calmness, mental clarity. But what about its interaction inside? It breaks down into compounds that stimulate the immune system. And so from that standpoint, as more research gets done about this, we're seeing that that may be one of the reasons that white tea in particular also has in the test tube anti-mutagenic effects. In other words, that's a big old long fancy word. So it's anti-tumor, anti-mutation. And it's because of the compounds within the white tea. So this is some of the alleged benefits. White tea in general, actually, while it has this calming effect, is higher in caffeine. So don't be confused. Don't tell your partner at 8 p.m., oh, let's see, I'm gonna have a light tea so it doesn't affect my sleep. If you pull this out and you have this tea, it will affect your sleep because white tea has more caffeine. And caffeine at the end of the day, especially for people who are sensitive to caffeine, interferes with their ability to have a good night's sleep. So just be aware of that. And even though you feel so calm, or you may feel calm drinking it, don't be fooled by that. In addition, in China, in addition to these alleged health benefits, in China for a while, and now becoming popular in more parts of China, is the sense of bathing in white tea. Now, the fact that I'm telling you this doesn't mean I'm recommending it. All I'm doing is telling you one of the trends now. And why has this become a trend? Because the thought is, if white tea is so good for the skin, why don't I bathe in it and get the benefits directly? This is potentially good if the white tea you're getting is from a traditional area of making white tea, so that would be in Fujian Province. If it's not from China, it's not done in the traditional way, and therefore it may not have the same benefits. All right, your 4 minutes is up. Your timers have gone off. And now it's time, not rushing, but just focus to separate the tea leaves from the tea liquid. Okay, and yours should look like this. It should look very much this color. And you'll know you've done it right if it's this color. Now, this one, in terms of color, has some real color to it, doesn't it? Some of the white teas, it's almost become a joke. You get the white tea, and the recipient thinks, oh, they forgot to put the tea leaves in, but not with this. This one, because as you saw, the leaves are larger. It comes from a varietal that's tree-like instead of bush. And so there's just more oomph in this. And if you look at the tea leaves, you'll see that they even left some stems in here. And again, that gives this more oomph. Yes.
Taste to me has some light honey along with a hint of dry autumn leaves.
Light honey along with a hint of dry autumn leaves. Why do I like this description so much? I love this description because it suggests that there's a natural sweetness occurring here, which I definitely feel. And dry autumn leaves, I really love that because you get this sense of being out in nature, actually. You can kind of feel, and I don't mind the seasonality of autumn being connected to this. Good comment, great comment. And so while you're continuing to think, I will continue to talk. Yes.
A round fragrance with a hint of ocean.
A round fragrance with a hint of ocean. So this particular commentator has picked up a little bit of umami and really said something nice here in terms of a round fragrance. In other words, the way I read this comment is that there's nothing that's out of balance. It's just pleasant. And again, with just that slightest hint of umami. Great comment. So does this tea varietal grow in any other place outside of Zhenghe? Well, there's a similar varietal in Fuding, and there's actually an exact same varietal in the Wui Mountains. They process it differently in the Wui Mountains, but the varietal is the same. So outside of Fujian, I've not seen this varietal before. However, that doesn't mean that I haven't been to every single place in China, so there can be places where they're actually growing this varietal. Would it be able to produce the same result? You have to look at a couple different things. First off, from a farming perspective or processing perspective, would they be doing it the same way? Is the terroir the same, both the cultural and the physical terroir? And it's just really, really hard to replicate. So you can get close, but would it be just like this? Very unlikely. Yes.
I can't put my finger on why, but something about this reminds me of a raw black.
Oh, how interesting. I do like this comment because this commentator is clearly carefully considering this whole tea. And so the comment is as follows. Cannot exactly tell us why, but to some degree, it brings up the thought of a raw black. And so part of why you may be thinking that, because as I'm evaluating what you just said, the raw blacks tend to have more body in them. This as a white tea has more body in it. So I think, and some of the raw blacks are sweet and they have that honey-like. So it's not that far away in terms of, it's not a stretch to say that as a comment, and certainly not a stretch for me to understand what you're indicating by that.
Very light, a hint of fruit taste.
Very light and a hint of fruit taste. And the answer to that would be yes, that's a great comment. There is that hint of fruit, and light is relative, isn't it? I always tell new tea drinkers, when you think of white tea is inherently light, but you have light, medium light, and heavy light. And so for me, yes, this is light, but it's the heavy light.
The flavor continues to fill my mouth long after each sip.
Great comment. Flavor continues to linger and fill this commentator's mouth long after the sip. That's one of the qualities of white tea, good white tea in general. The better the white tea is in general, the more it will linger, stick around, hold on, and just be there in your mouth. And that's one of the reasons, by the way, that they use white tea during contests and between tastings to get rid of the other flavors, because this is so strong in being able to do that.
The viscosity seems thick to me.
Viscosity is thick. So excellent comment, particularly on the heels of light, medium light, and heavy light. One of the reasons we're able to identify and say, yeah, this is heavy light, is because of that viscosity. It hangs around and there's body to it. It almost feels like there's a substance, almost a syrup. It's not quite to syrup, but it is in that direction. Great comment. Okay, good. Let's see how we're doing.
I have a question.
Yes.
How does viscosity and smoothness, are they the same, or how would you describe them differently?
Great question. Difference between viscosity and smoothness, and there is a difference. So smoothness, generally speaking, means no spikes in any flavor. It's on your tongue, and it's the sense that no part of what's on your tongue is foreign. It all blends and works together. It's like orchestral. I would use smoothness and orchestral together. The viscosity doesn't necessarily mean orchestral. It actually, for me, has a sense of concentration. So it's almost like out of that orchestra, you had 6 yo-yo mas sitting at their cellos, and those 6 all together, the rest of the orchestra stopped, and those 6 all together played, and you get the richness. So richness kind of versus smoothness is how I put those two together. Is that okay? All right. As usual, all of you have made great contributions to this discussion. White tea in general is considered a nutraceutical in China. And if you ask me, well, what proof do I have for that? And what's the evidence that I can go back and have an intelligent discussion about? I don't have that for you. I have, this is their feeling. This is how they sell white tea. We do know that the chemical constituents change as it ages, but what does it, in quotes, cure, or what is it good for? There are all sorts of discussion points about that in China, but I've not found anything that I can say to you and then, oh, yeah, he said this will make my hearing perfect over the next 3 years. we're Americans. We like to know that science has lined up facts, repeatable facts, by the way, and that there's a result that we can then replicate. So while we're aware of all this chatter about age white, and we know people who swear by it in China, for me to tell you anything more than anecdotal evidence would be foolish, because I haven't seen enough scientific evidence. In other words, I don't know what compound it is that at 1 year old is different at 10 years old, which makes it so much better. All I can tell you is that herbalists in China talk about, especially white tea, age white tea, that the population as a whole seems to believe that age white tea is very good for you. So, yes.
What is the second and third steep time?
Second is 2 minutes. The third is 3 minutes.
And
Those are steeping times. Yeah.
one last comment or another comment. Aroma is on the sweet side, kind of like maple syrup. Taste is smooth and neutral for it.
Taste smooth and neutral for this commentator. Why do I like so much this comparison to maple syrup? And I assume that the maple syrup that you're referring to is one of the lightest grades. So you get some of that viscosity and intensity in your mouth, but it's still light. And that's why I like that comparison. And as soon as you said it, I could picture, because in years past, this is a long time ago, I used to be a big consumer of maple syrup. I don't do that anymore. However, I always looked at the colors and was able to look at the grades and distinguish those differences in terms and appreciate those differences. So that's a great comparison. Great comparison. Alrighty, I think we're about ready to wrap up in this case. You've made great comments. I salute you for your focus on understanding this tea. This tea is easy in terms of drinkability, has that smoothness, hints of sweetness. You can't believe that we aged this for 14 years. That's the other thing. And again, this goes back to this discussion last week, where our methodology in here is a big home run. And we're proving that we can keep this tea in very, very good condition. Because for those of you who weren't on last week, we're looking at a study, or I was looking at a study, and same varietal over from 1 year to 16 years old, and they had experts commenting on the flavor and so forth. And the one thing that was different from here was that the temperature, the average temperature that they stored their tea was higher, considerably higher than ours. And the result, of course, is there's a difference. And in some way, it doesn't taste the same. This consistently tastes like it's a 2 or 3 year old tea in terms of that maintenance of sweetness. All right. Great to spend this time with you. What's going to happen next week? I'm trying to think if there's something stunning that should happen. Oh, wait a minute. Stunning. Yes, we're going to have the tea named Stunning next week. You guys be prepared to be stunned. In the meantime, you have an assignment this week. For those of you this first time on, yes, I give assignments every week, as a matter of fact. The assignment for this week is for all of you to stay healthy. Look forward to seeing you all next week. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Stop the video and stop the meeting.
Oh.